Alaikum. Welcome everybody to this session on parental controls and our children's devices, electronic devices. This is a very broad topic. We're going to try to just show a brief introduction here. We're going to divide it into two presentations back to back. I'm going to cover, controls and on the Apple platform, and Akhuna Asim here is going to continue with Google and Microsoft platforms. So the idea, of course, is that we just want to, most of these controls, hopefully a lot of us already use. We just want to put it all in one presentation so that we could, everybody would know what controls are available, what tools are available. That way, at least you get exposure to, keywords. That way you could research, you could access them on your devices or your children's devices. Or just know what to search for if you want to look this subject up in more detail online. Nothing substitutes a good conversation with the children, talking about why this is important. Parenting has always been challenging, probably, but I feel like in our time, it's more challenging because it used to be if the children are at home, then they are in the safe space. Well, now they could be at home and the non-safe space can get in the home. So this is something that we feel is important to just, get the community exposed to what tools are available. That way we can use these tools and try to learn how to use them. So like I said, it's a quick introduction. That has to be used in collaboration or in coordination with other things like talking about screen time, about why it's important to have constraints and limits on these things. So we're gonna start. So this is the outline. I'm just gonna, covering the Apple platform, I'm gonna go through these available tools, how to set up a family, and this is kind of a prerequisite, and creating individual children accounts in family. And then after that, the features and the advantages of setting up a family on Apple platform. Now there are three main categories, right? Find My, purchases and subscriptions, and then screen time. Screen time, the last section here is probably what we are referring to when we talk about parental controls, whether it's actual time spent on screen and then other restrictions and settings there. And for the Apple platform, even though I'm gonna show screenshots or talk about, for example, iOS, which is the operating system of iPhone and iPod, the same settings are gonna be really across the board for macOS, iPad, or iPad OS, and across the board on Apple platform. The settings are similar. So if we refer to something, on iOS, you're gonna find it if you have one account signed in to iOS or macOS, you change settings on one and you're gonna see it propagated on other devices. So screen time is gonna be divided into these 5 things that we're gonna go through quickly. Downtime, app limits, communication limits, always allowed, and then content and privacy restrictions. So to get started, we have this family thing in Apple accounts. So setting up a family is a necessary first step. I think many of us may already use it, but I do know also sometimes, not because we don't know, sometimes it's a lazy thing, like, oh yeah, you just bought a device for a child, and you just quickly set it up. You have an account already, you set up, and you give it to the child. There's probably nothing more terrible to do than that. Firstly, for your own account, because the child doesn't know, they could probably delete contacts. It's just bad, across the board. So you want to actually be able to set up a family so that you could add individual accounts and have everything set up individually. Once you have a family set up, that allows you to later have individual accounts and be able to control children's devices in a way that's good for them and for everybody. So to set up a family, you go, as you see here, go to settings and then tap your name on top, which is the Apple ID. And then there's a family sharing section. It has a setup next to it, and you tap continue. After you set up a family, you are now the family organizer. And as a family organizer, you could invite people, or you could create children's accounts. Children accounts, that means for children under 12. And a family can have up to 6 members. Inside family, you can then create individual accounts of children. As we said, you should never use your parent account to set up a device that's meant for children. Bad for you, bad for them. Your device is set up, or your account is set up as an adult by default, so it's really open and exposed to it assumes that you know what you're doing. It assumes that you're a responsible person. Depending on the age of the child, is just not good. So you need to create an individual account for your child, and to do that, within family settings, and then family. And family is once you have family set up, you will find it under your Apple ID. Once you go there, you're gonna find, as shown here on the circular button, the Add Member button on the top right. You click that, and you will be able to create child account as shown here. So you create child account, you tap continue, and then follow instructions. All you have to do is enter the child name and date of birth, and then pick an Apple ID. Now, for the child name and date of birth, those are 2 things you cannot change later on. So I really recommend you enter them correctly. Sometimes we tend to I don't have to put the exact information. An Apple ID is something that can stay for a long time with your child, so you enter your child name correctly and date of birth. And then when you are selecting an Apple ID, you have the option to select an existing email or make a new email. I recommend just select an iCloud email address unique to them that can stay with them. All right, so now that you have set up a family, you invited your spouse maybe. You could invite your spouse if she has an Apple account. You both would be parents, and you could share the responsibilities of managing this the account for the children. You created Apple IDs for your children with unique email addresses, and that's the email address for your child that you're going to use to set up when you first sign in on a new device. That's what you use to set up their device. Having done that, these are kind of some features and advantages that are automatic. When you go to Find My, for example, on your own device, you will find that on the people there, automatically the family will show up. Location of people in your family, that means your children, you'll know where they are. I mean, if they're old enough to take their devices outside the house, for example. But also individual devices within the family. So if a child has an iPad, has an iPhone, an AirPods even, these devices will also, they have locations shown if they're lost. Now, the reason why this is important, or one of the reasons, is that you could see if you tap on individual devices, like how much battery remains on the device, in case it's lost somehow and it's gonna lose battery. You could play a sound to find it if it's close but you can't find it, but you could also, hopefully you never have to do this, mark it as lost or erase it remotely. So these are just advantages and features that are available once you set up family. Other features and advantages is sharing purchases and subscriptions. One important aspect, of course, that I see subscription that's used commonly is iCloud storage. You could use this instead of having to buy extra storage for every member of the family or more than one. You could all share one storage. So if you buy 200 gigabytes or 2 terabytes, you could share it for the whole family. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is going to be mixed up, as some people think. No, everybody, they have their own area that's private. The accounts are all private. But you're just going to share, you're going to pay for 2 terabytes and everybody's going to share it, or 200 gigabytes and everybody's going to share it. So that kind of saves money that way. That's, again, just an advantage to setting up a family. And then, purchases, like some apps, can also be shared. If one family member buys an app, most of the time you could download it for free for other members. Of course, other purchases like books, maybe music, also can be shared. And as the family organizer, you could put one credit card for everybody to use. Of course, children still need to request permission in the system. They can't just buy, they will need to request permission. So it's all set up, nicely there. So now that we covered just some other, the necessary conditions and some, features and advantages, we get to the screen time, which is the topic of our discussion here, mostly. So screen time is not about only the time spent on screen, which when you have it set up, you will be able to know how much your children is spending time on screen, not only in aggregate, but also, if you want, you can look by app, see if there's particular apps they're spending more time on or excessive time on. And you can see how much time they're spending on a particular device or in aggregate. So there's a lot of details there. Of course, the screen time configurations and settings are secured with a unique password. So that's a password you choose, and it should be different than the device passcode. And it defeats the purpose if your children know the passcode. So, and the screen time settings that we're going to talk about, they can be accessed on the child's device with the passcode. You could do it there on the device of the child, or on your own device, you could access the child's screen time settings. And then, of course, time limits in general, all these constraints under screen time can be done for each device or in aggregate for all devices of a child. This is also something you can configure, and we're going to discuss. Under screen time, there are, as we saw earlier, there's like five things, really. One of them is downtime. Downtime is the most straightforward one. I think most of the people, a lot of people I know use this specifically and almost exclusively because it's kind of simple. If they don't want to get into putting time limits for particular apps and having, seeing a lot of requests for approval from the child, they say, it's okay, the child can use the device during the day, but I'm going to specify a downtime. I'm going to say from 8 p.m. till, 9 a.m. in the morning, it's downtime. You can't use the device. And then during the day, it's kind of open after that. So that's something you could say. You could say you set up a downtime between, at what time in the evening to what time in the morning, across all devices, you can't use the device. And then 5 minutes before downtime, a pop-up will come up to tell the child that screen time or downtime is going to start in 5 minutes. And they could, at that time, request extension or, we could talk. Conversations are important in this. After downtime, we go to communication limits. So this is not about what app you could use, or this is about whom the children can communicate with. So it's about controlling the contacts that they have, that they could text or call or FaceTime with, and whom they can actually communicate with, whether during normal time or screen time or during downtime. The limits, as you can see here on the screen, they can be set differently or separately for screen time, which is normal time, when they can use the screen, and during downtime. So during screen time, the options are contacts only, or contacts, or groups that have at least one contact, or everyone. You could say, they can communicate with everyone during screen time. And it's your decision what to pick. Contacts only seem to be a good idea, and then if contacts need to be expanded, you could be part of that conversation with your child. Then during downtime, you could still say, it's not like you can't talk to anybody during downtime, but it'll be something for emergency. You could say it's specific contacts. And you could specify what contacts they can communicate with you in downtime. It could be something that, you as parent, the other parent, maybe grandpa, grandma, something like that. After these two, subcategories, which are communication, like allowed communication and downtime, we go to app limits. Here in this case, you get to set time allowance per app or more than one app, or app categories. So for example, you could specify time allowance, maybe, 30 minutes or 1 hour for a particular app. Or you could say, no, actually, all games can have, 2 hours. You could also say, no, actually, I'm gonna go even expand just more broad, just games, entertainment, and social networking, all of them give 2 or 3 hours or 1 hour, whatever time limit you think is appropriate. So you could specify time allowance that way. Or you could say, for education and productivity, it's open. It's 10 hours. Just put some number that's high to encourage them that, these are the things that you can still use if you want. And then you could have different time allowance for different days. For example, more on weekends than weekdays. Maybe if there's a day where there's some other activity going on, limit screen time because there's soccer or something else. So that's kind of app limits, and I'm showing here just an example. Generally, even when they're using some app, the children are using some app, and the time allowance has been used, they could request extended time, so they could enter it there if you can do it with them on their phone, on their device, or they can request it remotely and you get it on your device. On your parent device, you get to approve either 15 minutes or 1 hour, or not approve, or approve all day. So it's flexible that way, but like I said, a lot of people don't prefer to use app limits because of these very detailed restrictions you have to go to set it up. It's kind of, it's some work, actually. So some people say, well, you know what, just specify downtime, and otherwise it's open. I like to set app limits. So now we get to always allowed. This is an interesting category, because if you're putting app limits, you're putting 2 hours of screen time, you're putting downtime. Then you get to say, actually, these apps are always allowed, anytime. Why would somebody do something like that? Well, okay. You could do messages, FaceTime, phone, because these can be an emergency things. Now, if you say phone or messages or FaceTime can actually be used all the time, that just means the app itself can open. It still has communication limits with whom they can contact. This just says that they can open the phone and call you or send you a message anytime, because you specify, as far as communication, you could only communicate, for example, with a specific contact during downtime, or with your contact during screen time. So this just says these apps can always open. You still can specify communication limits as we discussed before. You could also say, well, you could open the Quran app anytime. You could open chess app anytime. IXL, which is an educational thing. This is just one more tool that if you're gonna use app limits to make the device really restrictive, you could also allow other things, and they're gonna find it's gonna be clear on the device that these things are still available, and to encourage them to use those things. So we get to the final category within screen time, which is content and privacy restrictions. And under that, there's 4 things. There's iTunes and App Store purchases, there's allowed apps, there's allowed changes, and content restrictions. On this slide, we're just gonna talk about the first 3. For iTunes and App Store purchases, if you click on that under the page of content and privacy restrictions, you're gonna see that you will get to this page on the top right, where you can restrict whether the child on their device can actually install apps or not, can delete apps or not, okay, and then whether you can do in-app purchases or not. If you allow in-app purchases, for example, they will still have to get approval, but it's just saying that they can do it or not. And then, of course, you could specify other things like whether it always requires password or not if they're gonna download a new app. But if you're concerned about downloading some apps that maybe you don't want you don't want or you want to be part of that conversation, then you could say no new apps are allowed. They have to come to you, and you could do it. You could bypass it with your code. But that's as far as the iTunes and App Store purchases. Then there's the allowed apps, and this is, we're talking about built-in apps here. By default, any iPhone, any iPod, iPad, they have a list of apps that are already on the device, like Mail, Safari, FaceTime, all these things. In this page here, on the lower, the lowest image that you see, you could turn off any of these, and what happens, it'll hide it. It's not available anymore on the screen. You can't see it. So if you turn off Mail, Mail doesn't exist. It didn't delete it, it's just not available. So it's still in the system, but they can't use it. It's not like they click on it and it doesn't launch. No, it just disappears. So that's also something you could do. For example, for a small child, why would the email be there? Maybe you just make it simple and turn it off. At some point when they grow up, you could enable it. And then finally on this slide, there's the allow changes section. And you can see here, this is important because you can control within screen time whether passcode on the device can change, whether the Apple ID settings, the account settings can change, and other important features you could see here in that red square. So that's important because you don't want silly kids to just change device passcode or account settings. So you have control over that. It gives you some control, and we could, like I said, have this conversation why this is important with your child, depending on the child age, right? We're talking about, you could start, in our case, my children had devices from when they're really, really young, but with a certain environment where it's kind of controlled a little bit. So after this, we come to the content restriction section of the content and privacy restrictions. And here, there's 4 sections underneath it. And we're going to talk about the first one here, which is the allowed store content. That just limits what actually can be bought or purchased and played on the device through the App Store. So it talks about music, movies, TVs, books, and apps. And every one of these categories have its own ratings in the United States or any other country. You could see them for yourself. I mean, just for things like books and music, it's simple, it's clean or explicit, right? It makes sense, just select clean. I'm not saying these are the settings that you should do. I'm just showing what those are. I took these screenshots online, but putting here where I took the screenshots from on the lower right corner. But for movies, for example, you could see there's PG, PG-13, etc. And then for apps, you could say, oh, I want only 4 plus or 9 plus, 12 plus, whatever you feel are comfortable with. And that would make searches in the App Store show up only per this. So if you say 4 plus, it's going to be really restrictive. Only apps that are good for kids 4 years old are going to show up. So maybe you want to pick 9 plus in this case. So it depends. But this is where you control these things, what music search will show up, what movies, what books, what TV shows, what apps. You set this here. After that, we're going to talk about the last 3 here, web content, Siri, and Game Center. So in web content, and this is an important topic here because Safari is there, you could open the browser. If you choose to keep Safari, which is useful sometimes, you can specify one of 3 things. You could say it's unrestricted, clearly not for children, it's not a good idea. You could say limit adult websites. Okay, that's probably a good step. You could be more restrictive if you want to say allowed websites only. If that's the case, then you have to add websites. You could have a list as long as you want. You could add all the websites. Say these are the websites that you can access. That's very restrictive. It's also more work on your part. You have to go and add all websites that they actually need. If they do research, that's going to be challenging. So it's probably a good idea to limit adult websites, and then you could additionally, if you like, block specific websites. And that's where you could add websites under never allow. That's probably a better thing, because if they do research for the school, then you can just have only allowed websites unless you really are gonna go through a list of extreme list of websites. Probably better to just say limit adult websites, and then if you would like, you could add websites that you never allow. And then as far as Siri, you could say, whether or not you allow web searches through Siri or explicit language, you set that. You could limit that there. And finally, the Game Center. In this case, the Game Center, you could specify things as you show here. I'm not saying you should use these settings. I'm just saying that these are settings that allow you to specify whether your child is allowed to play with everyone, or maybe limit to contacts, maybe allow them to only play with nearby multiplayer like their siblings, because in the house, maybe you don't allow the device to leave the house depending on how old they are. If they're like 6 years old, well, they're not gonna leave with the device, so they could play with the sibling. Again, private messaging, you could choose not to allow that. Profile privacy changes, you don't allow that, for example. Things like that. You could control these things too. So I went very quickly through all this. I know it's very brief. We have like 1 hour between me and Asim here, so he's gonna cover Google and Microsoft platforms. And so it's very condensed, and it's very overwhelming. But these are settings that you just want to tell you this exists on the Apple platform, on your devices and your children's devices if you have them. So we just want to give you an idea of what's there, so you could reach out, maybe research and maybe search on your devices. So yeah. We're gonna not do Q&A now. Asim is gonna take over, and we're gonna do it towards the end. Okay. Transition, yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you guys hear me? Right, and you can see the presentation. Okay, so I'm gonna first talk about the Family Link, which is the Android platform. So if you have an Android phone, Android tablet, or Chromebook, this will work on those devices. So what is a Family Link? It's a free app that is available from Google platform to monitor and manage children's smart devices. With this app, parent can set up child Google account, restrict app usage, set up screen limit, time, monitor their children's location, and much more. So these are some of the features that are highlighted here. Most of the stuff is similar to what Zeidan talked about on the Google platform. The only thing that was new to me was the communication part. I have not seen anything in that area. Maybe there is something available. I recently started using this, I think this year. So what I did research so far, these are the features that I found that are useful that we can start using as of today. So the most important thing out of all this is for children to have their own account. It's very important that they have their own account with their age, so the controls are there to determine what they need and all that stuff. So some of the features like web filtering, similar concept here in Android as well. You can filter the website, block the website. For example, there's a 7-year-old and he has a tablet. You can go in and just block all the website and just allow one or two websites that they need or something, right? Or they don't need any website. So all those features are similar, like web and application filtering. Then you have time limit that determines how long a device can be used. You can do it on each device or different devices together. Location tracking, this is more like on the phone. They can find out where the kids are, and it can track location history, where they went. Scheduling, choose specific time of the day or week that is allowed for children to use the device. So like downtime, allowed time, like on the weekend they can have more time or weekdays less time. Then activity reporting, so you get some kind of reporting back to you that what apps they're using, where they are spending their time, how much time they are spending, and all this stuff. So before this, you need to start a conversation with your children and talk to them that this is what you are trying to do. Because I was having similar issue with, not issues, but I talked to my daughter. She was using a tablet and stuff. So we couldn't, I had some time limit, but we couldn't enforce it, you know. There's no way I could figure out how long she used it and all this stuff. So this is how I started, and finally we talked to her, like, let's put some time limits so you know how long you're using it, and I know how long you're using it. So we started setting up this Google account that way. So a little bit more detail, devices that can be supervised, like I mentioned, Android devices, Chromebook. Location reporting is not available on the Chromebook. It will be available on the phone and stuff. Devices can't be supervised, like iPhone, iPad, and computer, except Chromebooks. So we'll cover that. iPhone and iPad, Zeidan covered. Computer, I'll cover in Microsoft presentation. Simple way to set up, you can install the app on your phone, or you can install, if you're setting up a device for children, you can start there and put their age and put their information there and create a child account. And then on the parent side, you can install the app and link the child account to the parent account. Or you can start at the parent account and just create a child account from there. There's nothing much here. Yeah. Next thing, content restrictions. So these are the content you can restrict on in Google Play Store, what they can purchase, what they can browse, what they can download. All the purchases require your approval and stuff. Like, for example, you can set up the rating for games. You want every one game, 10 plus games. There's different ratings. You can check those for details. And then a YouTube content setting, like preschool, younger, or older. It gives you age range. For preschool is like 4 or 5 years younger, and younger is like 8 years to 10 years, something like this, and then the older kids. Chrome browser, again, manage and block sites. You can also restrict which site they can not go. For example, Instagram or Facebook, you can block those sites completely. And then Google Assistants, also you can block, like they can ask simple question to Google Assistant and not all the questions, you know. You have the ability to block that. Photo sharing, you can completely block that if you're not sharing any photos with anybody. And app limits, you can set time on an individual app. Let's say you give your children time to spend 2-3 hours on a device. You don't want them to just 3 hours on one game, you know, and you can maybe restrict that game to 1 hour or something, and they can do something else for the rest of time. So these are details. Take some time to set up and sit down and set up all these things and go through the details. It's very important to set it up right. In the time limit and downtime, it's showing on the right side. A similar concept to Apple, you can set up time limits, reminders. So what happens in the time limit, when it reaches its end time, the user will get a reminder that your time is about to end in 15 minutes. So the kids will know that, okay, it's about to end, I have to close down. At that time, they can request time. They can do it in person, or they can request online. If they request online, you'll get a reminder here that your kid is requesting time, you can approve. Or in person, then you have to enter your code so they can continue a little bit more time. You can set up daily limit, you can set up weekly limit, like I talked about this. In the downtime, again, I have the same thing, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. is downtime. They cannot use any devices. When device is locked, they cannot see notification. Parent can allow, it's a similar concept to Apple, the allow apps. You can allow some apps that children can use. Let's say if they're away, they can use the phone or map or something like this, you know. And they can also, anytime they can do an emergency call, and then they can use that feature to call you anytime. And you can have multiple devices. Like if you can see on the screenshot, I have like a phone and a tablet on this monitoring. So this is, so Apple, this Android is similar to what Apple has in terms of features and stuff. But some people might have a PC, a laptop at home, so they are not able to control that from Android. So for them, there's a very good software, Microsoft Family Safety. It's available free, but there's a premium version which you can buy up to $100 a year, and it gives you 6 terabyte of space, up to 6 users. So everybody can have Microsoft Suite. You know, if you are used to using Microsoft products, you can download those products. If you have the premium version, you can download. If you have a free version, you can use online softwares for free. But if you have a premium, you can download and you can use all those software that you have been used to using. So in the Microsoft Family Safety app, it's the same as a tool to create and protect children from any harm on the internet may cause. A parent can monitor, track, and control their children's internet use. Some of the stuff, like I said, could be available in the premium, but most of the stuff is available in the free version, like screen limit, content restriction, location tracking and sharing, monitoring driving habits. I find that interesting, the last one. It's available in the premium section. We'll talk about that in more detail. So I hope you can see all the features that are available. Same thing here, spending you can control, you can give them some budget if they want to buy some app or something. At least, still they have to buy in those restriction app, but they can have some money if they are playing Xbox game or something. So this is for that. Location tracking is second one. Family Safety app is the second one. It gives you a platform to see everything. Activity reporting is really nice. You can get a weekly report that shows you how long they have used the apps and what apps they're using. Similarly, content filtering, drive safety. There's other features like email, family calendar that you can share between whole family note, and the screen time. So to set it up, there's 2 ways you can set it up. You can do it on the PC itself. You can go in the PC, and you can start there and add your family. But I prefer another way. If you can simply go to the family.microsoft.com, you can set up your family there. You can start your account, and then you can set up your wife account as another admin. And then you can set up your children account there, and their age and stuff, you know. So when you set up the children account, you will see what kind of restriction, like depending on the age, you can restrict their web restriction, the screen time and all that. Under each kid, you can go ahead and do that. So in the configuration, again, I talked about like summary email that you get every week. You can also see the summary anytime. You can log into the app. It's available on all the platforms. So if you have the app, you can see how long they have spent every day on the computer. Web search and filtering is best to use. If you're going to use Microsoft, then use the Microsoft Edge browser. Let's say you are used to using Chrome, then you have to combine Android and the Microsoft app together to get the good coverage. Otherwise, it would be nice just to use one, like for example, if you're going to use Microsoft, then you stick with the Edge, so it can be restricted, all those features and stuff. Similar concept, allow and block website, screen time monitoring, online gaming, Xbox usage, set age rating and all that stuff. There's another Xbox family setting app, that's a separate app that is more toward the online gaming and stuff, so maybe you have to combine with that. And maybe in the future, Microsoft might include that in this app as well. So finally, I want to talk about this driver safeties for little older kids who are getting ready to drive. There's another feature here that can track their speed, phone usage, braking, acceleration, so you can start a conversation with your kids that in the beginning you have to monitor their driving and maybe have a conversation with them if they are doing any of these things. So that's another way to look and their driving habits and stuff, you know. There are other tools that are available in the market that I want to talk about and show you. For example, NetNanny is another tool. It's available on the platforms. You can go to netnanny.com, but it's not a free tool, so it will cost like $6 a year. That's one of the, so some of these tools showed up in like PC Magazine, Tom's Guide, CNET, those kind of websites, so I got this list from there. So NetNanny is one. Kaspersky SafeKid is another one. It's available on our platform, so this is all-in-one app. It can monitor all the different platforms and stuff. Custodio is another one. It's also paid. That's also available on all the platforms. So these are other paid, but I will say just start with the free stuff that is available. It's pretty good from Android, Apple, and Microsoft. And then as you see the need, then you try to look into other areas. So this is the end of the presentation, and we can have question and answer session. Zeidan, are you here? Yeah. So if you have any question, we can answer. Yes.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
What is called Family Link?
Yes.
Is this from Android or from third party?
So the question is, the Family Link, is it from the Android or the third party? So this is from Google, the Family Link app. So this works on their platform really good, I mean. Yeah. Any other question for Apple or? Yes, so there are some,
Repeat the question.
yeah, the question is that there's any like DNS filtering or at the router level, right? So there are some apps for if you have some routers. They also have parental control on the router level. So you can do some settings there. But I have not used recently, but I've seen parental control is there. It's available on those devices. I don't know about Google router. They have anything like this?
What I've also briefly now, I do usually all these controls on the Apple platform. I do them on the default tools available that I've covered on the Apple platform. I just briefly read somewhere where, for example, whatever router you have, if you set up your DNS through, I think it was Cloudflare, they have like a couple of DNSs, and then they have ones that they say are automatically filter explicit content. You have to look into it more, that Cloudflare DNS. It's a free and public thing, but I haven't tested it, but you can look into that.
So some of these apps that I mentioned, they might be doing that to control all the devices and stuff, because at the device level, you need to have an Android or Apple device to really control everything, right? So they might be doing it that way. Yeah. Any other question? Anybody's already using these apps? So, okay, so one person, yeah. Any question from sister? Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask in terms of like, when you say adult content and certain things, like right now we're at a point where sometimes what is considered adult and what's considered acceptable isn't really acceptable.
Right, right.
So to what extent does it really help? I don't know. I'm not on top of these. My husband takes care of it, but I want to know to what extent does it really close these websites?
So in the Android and Microsoft, I will not have adult for any child, I mean, so maybe PG-13 or, because most of the work that they're going to do will cover that unless they are doing some other, I think most of it will be covered under that rating. So yeah, you have to be careful, because if you go to that other rating, adult level, then it opens up the door for a lot of other websites that are not appropriate for Muslims, So.
So if I understood the question correctly, yeah, you're referring, this topic is kind of interesting, right? Because what may be PG-13 for somebody, actually, it's a subjective thing. You think, oh, well, maybe we should look for something even more restrictive. It's a personal choice, yes. I just covered what's available. Now, for web content in general, like I said, there's, at least on the Apple platform, they give you the option to say, well, I actually want to just limit adult content. And that's the question you're asking, is like, what is that? That could not be sufficient, for example, for some people. And that's okay. But then you could say, well, in addition to that, I want to not allow these lists of websites, whatever you can think about. It's hard. But if you limit the access to only allowed websites, it's also very restrictive, and it could be okay unless they're actually doing some research for school. Then it's going to be a problem, right? So it's not perfect, right? This is a tough thing. Like I said, I feel parenting used to be easier. I think. Right. Right. And common sense, you'll find common sense, it's not very common too, so.
Well, Sayyidu, did you miss any feature that you love to use or you're using currently?
I actually used the Family Link before, and now I'm using the Apple Family, a mix of both, because my kids some have Chromebooks, some have Apple devices, so I use a mix of both. For the younger kids, they can only go to allowed website, and basically I will, for the other stuff like research and things like that, I will approve on demand. So whenever they need to visit a website for school, they will, request access, and I will look at it on my phone and approve it on the fly. So that's what I do for the younger ones. For the older ones, I try to give them more access and then monitor after that and see where they're going. But I find it all very useful. So if some kids have Apple device, obviously you want to use whatever is built into iOS. And for those that have Google Chromebooks and things like that, the Google Family Link works very well. I've also I'm still using Microsoft Family as well for the PC computers at home. So it's a combination of all the tools that we have. And it's convenient control from my phone. Like whenever they have a request and things like that, I automatically get that from my phone, regardless of which one of them they're using. So if you haven't tried it, you give it a try, and it's fairly simple to use once it's set up.
Yeah, it's like we said, this is meant to be a very quick and brief introduction. It's so much material. We couldn't cover everything clearly, or not at the level that's needed for somebody to really understand how to go through these. It's just meant to give you exposure to what tools already is available in devices that you've already paid for. That way you could look for it in the devices, or you could research it more. You could reach out for questions maybe later, or you could ask your friends. But yeah, these tools are available for us to use to just make the job a little easier. It's not going to be easy. Still challenging, but nonetheless, this is what we have, and we have to use what we have. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else, or this is it? Okay. He has one. Oh.
So yeah. This is a question for somebody that has to be different than me. If you talk about PlayStation and these things, I'm probably too restrictive. We don't have those.
Today I was thinking about this, because I have all this screen time on my devices and stuff, but on TV, there's nothing there. So I just thought about it today. I was like, I need to look into something. Maybe Samsung might have something in that area, but I'm not sure.
I want to say something. So for TV, because you mentioned, PlayStation, these game consoles, right? I mean, kids have games on Apple devices that I am familiar with, but for TV, we have Apple TV. So all these restrictions apply. You could specify these things.
The screen time is there too?
So TV usually is the living room. You could specify that, right? Like in terms of, okay, no TV after what time? It's a living room thing. It's not a device they can take and control. But I don't know. I mean, we haven't.
Does it go by account?
Yes. So TV is, that's the thing. It's even though it's within the Apple platform, it's Usually you set up as a parent, but within that, there's different apps, and each app has their different profiles. So there's kids profiles for, like, if you're talking about Netflix or other apps within the platform. It's still nothing, you have to be aware of what's going on, and TV is in a living room thing, hopefully. It's not like in bedrooms. Don't recommend. So this is something that you...
Yeah, a couple of things I'll mention is generally we should have computer in the open area. Children should not be using in the rooms and stuff, right? And for TVs, yeah, I didn't see any specific time limitation and stuff, but I think at the app level, you can restrict it, right? Because like, for example, Netflix, it will have a kid profile. And I'm sure if you go deep in there, there might be some limit on the time limit as well. But I have not looked into that those issues yet. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Attending.
Assalamu alaikum.